Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Caleb Teskey, coming at you with another fantastic guest tonight, as usual. I do want to send a couple of shout outs also, as usual, to my last couple of guests here. We're on the third end of a back-to-back run here. And yesterday we had Keith Griswold and Nate Liberty from Green Mountain Scientific. Really great chat with those guys. Thank you guys for coming on the show. And, of course, John Rogers from Farmers Underground. We had my man Brennan Krause from Bigfoot Flower Company. That was super fun. And we got a bunch of great stuff coming at you here. I got Alex Miller coming back, my True Leave whistleblower from Florida. He's coming back on Sunday. I've got Miguel Lopez from LB Farms coming back on Tuesday the 17th. Super excited to catch up with Miguel. And then we got Antoine Mordican coming at us from Alabama, and I'm super excited to get Antoine on the show. I'm trying to get a guest in every state. We're checking a lot of boxes off the list, and tonight we're going to check another box. And yeah, this is going to be great. You guys know I like to nerd out a little bit with the scientists. I've had a number of PhD scientists on my show. I had Scott Waring, I had Jeff Rawson, I had Tess Adam. And tonight we're gonna blast another one up there. Boom! It's Anna Schwabe. Anna, thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That's a pleasure. Before we do anything serious, I was hoping maybe you would give us a 5-minute life story.
Oh my God!
You can take more if you need.
Well, I don't want to bore everybody, but basically, let's see. When I was younger, my mom asked me what I wanted to be, and I said a biker chick with pink and green hair. Got half of that right. Well, a little bit of that right. Getting out of high school, I thought maybe I wanted to be a vet. I went to CSU, Colorado State University, for 5 years studying anatomy and physiology. Did not graduate because I turned 21 and sort of didn't. My last semester at CSU, I didn't pass any. I didn't even go to any classes, I don't think. But anyway, took some time off of school and had a baby. I worked in the pizza industry for about 15 years. And I ran a very successful Papa John's. We made a lot of money, but I just got sick of making pizza. So I decided to go back to school. When I went back to school, the school that I transferred to didn't have anatomy and physiology as an option for an emphasis in biology. So I switched to cellular and molecular genetics, thinking I might want to do cancer research or something like that. And what led me down the plant path instead of animals is that I needed a 400 level, like an upper division biology class to graduate, and I could not get into the animal behavior class because it was full. It was over full, and the only option I had and in order to graduate on time, I had to take this stupid plant taxonomy class, and I did not want to take it, but I had to put on my big girl panties, take that class. And that is where I met Mitt McLaughlin, who is he eventually became my mentor, my PI for both my master's and my PhD. I worked in his lab, started doing DNA extractions, told him maybe I want to do a master's. And he said, "You don't want to do a master's. It's not for you." And I said, "But I do." And so he finally was like, "Well, do you want to just keep going with the project that you're doing? You've already extracted, a good portion of the DNA samples that we need extracted." It was, over 800 samples. And I had already extracted like 600 of them just in a semester. And I was like, sure, that sounds great. Sclerocactus. I'm on board. I didn't even see that species that I was working on until my last semester of my master's degree. So that tells you, like, genetics is not, genetics is genetics. You don't even need to be touching your study species in order to gain information, which is the cool thing about genetics and why I got involved, because I thought that, sometimes when you go into these higher level degrees, it kind of pushes you into a corner. You become so specialized that you really don't have any options. But when you do genetics, the doors are wide open. So I did that. And then I worked for the Denver Botanic Gardens after I graduated on conservation, using genetics to inform land managers of, we need to protect this population. This population's fucked. So let's just, go and explore gas over there. And while I was doing that, the adult use market opened up in Colorado, and I was having conversations with friends, with coworkers, and one of the questions that kept coming up was, how come when I go to different dispensaries and buy the same thing, it's not the same thing? So then I thought, well, with my background, it would be really easy to answer that question. So I went to Mitt and I said, hey, I've got this really good idea. I want to do a PhD. What do you think? And he's like, no way, not doing cannabis, not touching it. Go away. But he went home and talked to his wife and was like, Anna keeps bugging me about this project and I don't want to do it. And she said, well, somebody's going to do it. Why don't you want it to be you? And so he came back and said, all right, you want to do it? And I said, yes. And he said, I don't know anything about cannabis. I have no idea where to get funding for this. You are on your own. I will be your mentor. I will help you, when, shape your experiments, whatever you need, reel you back in because you always go over the top. But basically on my own. And it started from there with that specific question. And from where it started to where it ended up was completely different, but did answer some really cool questions and got a pretty cool PhD out of it. And now I work in New Jersey for a company called 420 Organics / Shore Organics. We grow both types of cannabis. We grow hemp in the forest, and we also have a micro cultivation license for growing THC type cannabis. And we use aquaponics, which is where you use fish to feed the plants and use the plants to clean the water for the fish.
Oh, cool. So you guys got some cultivation going on down there in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the market in New Jersey, maybe how you found a location to select for your cultivation facility? And I'm not at all familiar with sort of the regulatory framework down there, but I'd really love to hear about it from someone who might be.
So really what's up and running, we have 5 greenhouses in the forest where we grow our CBD type hemp. And we are on, I think, our 5th redesign of the facilities. So aquaponics is a really nuanced system. You have not just the plants that you have to keep alive and give them whatever they need. You've also got the fish that you need to take care of. And there's some biofilters. So you can't just pour fish poo onto plants. They can't, their nitrogenous waste is not something that the plants can use. So we send it through biofilters, which is things like little teeny tiny shrimps, some worms and bacteria that transform the nitrogen into a form that the plants can use. So you have to keep all of these systems alive in order for this whole like miniature closed loop ecosystem to work. And when it doesn't work, everything goes to shit. So, if there's something in the fish food that's not making the fish produce enough waste, then, things can happen to the bacterial colony, which can then lead to a, decline in the nutrients for the plants, which then your plants suffer, which then if the plants are suffering, they're not, it just is a whole thing. Right. So that's our hemp side. Our, the adult use / medical cannabis market in New Jersey is somewhat of a I don't want to be too mean, but it's challenging.
I saw that look on your face, Anna.
So back in 2020, right? I think it was then. The voters said we want recreational in New Jersey, and so they were like, okay, let's do this. They opened up for licenses, and there were so many applicants that it crashed the system. The system was down, and they didn't start taking applications until about, I want to say September of 2022?
I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire too hard if you're in the right ballpark.
It was a long time. And then when they finally did start taking applications, it was taking a long time for them to push them through. They finally started approving applications. Yeah, I think that was in September 21. And the whole thing was to be to give people who, women, people of color, people who've been hurt by the war on drugs, those sorts of people were supposed to get the first licenses. That didn't happen.
Some of that social equity stuff.
Yes, that didn't happen. It all got too difficult, so they just gave all the multi-state operators who were already operating with medical marijuana in the state, they all got the rec licenses. And everyone was like, what the fuck? What the fuck happened? So now they've started giving out some normal licenses, and that's been going on for a few months. But honestly, we got our license in September of last year, our conditional license. We've had our facility, like our lease signed, and we're paying on the building since then. And we still don't have approval for our plans.
Wow. So you've got the whole facility built out and you're already
It's not built out. We can't do anything until they sign off on the plans.
You can't even build it out, but you have to pay the lease on the building while you're waiting for the state to get around to your license approval.
And it's not necessarily the state, it's the township. So each township has their own rules in addition to, like, so, if you want to build in a township, we're in South Toms River, you have to get the blessing from the township that you can have a facility. Then they have to do all these approvals and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, they are taking their sweet time on, they even lost some of our paperwork. So now we've got lawyers involved. It's just not going the way it should. It's not going smoothly. And our story is not, one of a kind. There's a lot of people in New Jersey that are sitting on licenses and can't do anything because they still need somebody's signature or a stamp of approval. So it's really annoying, but hashtag cannabis industry.
Yeah. I do want to also just, here, I got this loaded up. Wham. Oh, there we go. It's Anna Schwabe. Dr. Anna Schwabe. I'm psyched. Thanks for sending me that too. That looked real slick on the thumbnail. I do want to do a quick shout out for my dude at the bottom here. Info at Vermont Heady Labels. If you're in Vermont and you need, I don't know if it's just Vermont, but they're doing labels for cannabis companies. That's Dusty from Cambridge Cannabis. I meant to give him a shout out off the top and I spaced. Yeah. I want to ask you a question here that I have in my notes. And you said that plant professors are notoriously boring. And you said you one of your professors in college made learning about plants fun. And I found the opposite experience in college where I had fun doing physics before, and then they kind of sucked all the fun out of it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so my dad is a very avid gardener. I never really got into it. But as when you're in biology, part of that is you have to take general biology classes, and then the next step after general biology, where you learn that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. The next step is to learn about organisms, which would be animals and plants largely. Usually the bacteria, the prokaryotes and things kind of take a wayside to the all-important plants and animals. But I could never pass the plant portion of the class. I'm not very good at rote memorization. And a lot of those, those classes, you have to memorize like families and species and all this shit. And I just am not good at that. And the plants specifically for me were very difficult to wrap my head around because just their whole, life is just completely different, So I didn't want to go anywhere near plants. And every single time I had to take that plant portion, sometimes it's the same professor that teaches the plants and the animals, but a lot of times it's two different professors. And almost every time the plant professor was just, a guy in a tweed jacket with, leather elbow patches who was like 80 years old, droning on about plants and just made it so not fun. And even after, so I failed organismal biology three times before I finally passed it in my last year of college. So, folks out there, if you like biology, but you can't pass a class, just keep going. Like, just keep going. You'll get it. Like, eventually you'll get through it. But When I did pass it, it still wasn't a great professor, and I won't name him because I still come across him every now and then. He's a really nice person. Just, oh my God. Not a great teacher of the basic plant principles. But, this stupid plant taxonomy class that I had to take that was taught by Mitchell McLaughlin, who you'll see his name on all my papers because he's the one that raised me. He's the one that, that plant taxonomy class, he taught us about plants and, fruits and all kinds of stuff. And he just made it fun. He was so young, comparatively, young and energetic and passionate. And he really cares about plants a lot. And, one of the funniest things about his class is that he had a list, 100 must know plants that the first half of the class, you have to memorize the 50, second half, you have to memorize the second half of the list, the 50 to 100, 51 to 100. And again, I'm not good at memorization. But on top of that, we had to go out into the wilderness and collect 20 plants that were not on the must know list. And I was like, there's literally nothing left. How am I going to find anything that's not on this fucking list? See, that shows you how little I know about plants, right? I did find the 20. It went really well. And I ended up having to, work in his lab because I needed the lab experience credits to graduate and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got involved in plants. And I haven't really looked back. I haven't been like, oh man, I really miss animals.
And all right, so I want to ask you something that you touched on a little bit that's in my notes here about the quote I have from you is, "Are strains with the same name at different dispensaries the same?" And it sounds like maybe you went around and did some independent testing, and I'd love to hear about that a little bit, Anna.
I did. So that was the first question that I wanted to look into for my PhD. And one of the stipulations for me being allowed to do this work at the university that I was at is I couldn't bring any smokable product onto campus. Thank God I only needed the DNA. And it is possible to do a pre-prep before coming, bringing your samples on campus, make them basically not smokable. So that's how I kind of got around that. But I went to different dispensaries and purchased what they had on the shelves as they were labeled in the packaging that they were given in. I didn't tell anybody who I was. I wasn't wearing a lab coat. They had no idea that their samples were going to be involved in a genetic study.
You did mystery shopping.
And for that reason, I never named any of the dispensaries in any of my well, not in the first paper, because it wasn't a study to point any fingers like, haha, you don't have the same thing. It was just a call to, to show a cautionary tale to show, hey, if you're experiencing this is why. Yeah. So that's what I did. And I went to, I think it was, I don't remember how many dispensaries. It was 122 samples from 30 different strains from I don't know how many dispensaries across 3 states. And of those 30 strains, 27 of them had at least one genetic outlier. So one of these things is not like the other.
Could you explain to people what these genetic outliers are?
So what I was looking for, I was using really, really basic genetic methods to answer this question, because what I was looking for is, if I have 7 blue dreams, for example, are they all genetically identical or very similar, like what you would expect in seeds? And you can do that with pretty basic genetic tools. You don't have to do whole genome sequencing or anything like that. You can use some of the traditional methods. And so, of these 7 blue dream samples, 6 of them look almost identical, but there's one that looks completely different. That one, it would be a genetic outlier.
And can you tell us, you mentioned this earlier about DNA extraction. Could you explain to us the process by which DNA is extracted from plants?
Yeah. It's not as magical as people think it is. I've actually done it with my mom in the kitchen. I used to show kids how to do it at the Denver Botanic Gardens. So Plant cells are different from animal cells. They have a rigid cell wall, right? That's, gives plants their structure. Animals are squishy and they have like a membrane that's around the cell. So getting through that cell wall is really the trick with plants, and getting into the cell so that you can get into the nucleus and then get the DNA. So the first thing you have to do is somehow get into get through that cell wall. The easiest way to do that is to freeze the cell. And then all of that water that's in the cell creates crystals, and those crystals puncture the cell walls, which, it ruptures the cell walls. And then you use mechanical action like a mortar and pestle to grind the plant tissue. And then all of those cellular pieces are sort of, they're in little bits. Then you add some detergent and some other, alcohol and stuff like that, and you can get the DNA out very easily. There's a very cool way that you can extract DNA from strawberries using pineapple juice and alcohol, like really high alcohol content. You use frozen strawberries because if they're frozen, they've already been frozen and they've already had the ice crystals. The cell walls are already ruptured. Yeah, and then you like mash it up with pineapple, which has an enzyme that unwinds the DNA from the histone. It breaks down the proteins that the DNA is wound around. And so then you add alcohol, like Everclear or something like that. DNA is not soluble in alcohol, so it comes out of solution and it floats to the top, and it's really cool. And then you can drink it, and people think that's really gross. And I'm like, but that's what you're eating every time you eat anything that's been alive.
Huh. That's wild. You're using a fruit juice to sort of extract DNA from a strawberry?
Yeah, it makes a really great daiquiri too.
And I'm trying to quit drinking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Don't worry about it.
You can also add soap, which also helps. And then maybe you won't want to drink it if you add the soap to help.
You don't want a soap daiquiri?
No.
One thing I wanted to ask you about before we get too much further here, and I forget, is this aspect of the federal illegality of cannabis. And for someone like you who's trying to do research, I understand that trying to get funding for research can be incredibly difficult whenever cannabis is involved.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
have you ever tried to get any funding for research?
There was no funding, no federal funding, not in the way of those big, $100,000 grants, which is what I would have needed in order to do some of the genome type, genetic analyses that everybody's doing these days. There just wasn't any funding. And that was part of what Mitt said to me. He's like, I don't know where to get funding for this. So the university that I went to did some internal grant offers, every semester. There was research grant opportunities and travel grants and things like that, which I applied to every single one of them. And I think all but one I got, but those were only like $400 to $600, nothing big. So really it was like a super grassroots project that I was working on, like no funding really to speak of. I think my whole PhD, I don't think it was more than $10,000. And most of the cannabis that I had in my studies, I purchased out of pocket with my student loans.
Yeah, so all this mystery shopping you did, that was all stuff that you just did on your own, out of your own dime.
Yeah, well, now I have to pay back my student loans, so yeah.
Well, yeah, me too. I don't know if that's ever gonna happen, but yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have anybody to help me pay for this. Dr. McLaughlin is very good at he's very frugal, and whenever there was, we did plate-based PCR whenever, and then send it in for, fragment analysis, whatever. But whenever there was empty wells on a plate, you either have to pay for a half a plate or you pay for a full plate. If there's any empty spaces, he would let me put my samples in because we were already paying for it on another project. So it was kind of like very piecemeal, very think out of the box. I had to do, like I said, partial DNA extractions off campus. which sounds really unsanitary and probably wouldn't work for a lot of projects. But my primers that I was using, the thing that I would use to amplify are very species specific. So if I sneezed on a sample or didn't use gloves or whatever, it wouldn't have contaminated anything or messed anything up. But yeah, it was, I had a salad spinner that I would use to spin down samples, and
I've seen other people do that. Yeah.
yeah, it works pretty well. $30 at TJ Maxx.
Awesome. Yeah, that's wild. And I also have a note here that says that we were talking about the genetic spectrum of hemp, and you mentioned that maybe you tested some of the NIDA cannabis from the University of Mississippi. And
I sure did.
Yeah, for people who don't know, and I want to just make sure I'm clear on this, I believe that if you want to do any type of research on cannabis, you have to get it through NIDA, and the University of Mississippi is the only place producing it. Is that accurate?
That used to be the case. The DEA, sort of controls that, and they have opened up research licenses, given the pushback since scientists have shown that the research grade marijuana from the University of Mississippi is not appropriate to be doing research on, because it's not anything like what people have actual access to. But there's still not very many licenses out there. It's still, and if you're doing like cannabinoid analysis or extraction techniques, whatever, cannabis is cannabis. But when you're actually giving it to patients in the form of smokable cannabis, like they have had different studies, and there aren't very many, where they would supply the patient with a certain amount of joints per month that would come from the University of Mississippi. It was, they were involved in a clinical study or whatever, where they would track these patients who were smoking this cannabis. You can order either, pre-rolls in, they don't have strains available. They used to have something like 50 strains. Now what you can get is CBD, low THC, medium THC, high THC, high THC/C, and it's just sort of like, that's what it is. And you can order bulk. So you can order, if you order in bulk, it comes in like a box with a bag in it, and it's just full of like shake, basically, with twigs and sticks and leaves and all kinds of stuff. It's definitely not just flour. And I know why they do this, and people might be like, oh my God, that's terrible. But, they really have to, because they're giving medicine for clinical trials. They have to make sure that every time somebody receives that product, it's the exact same every time. And we all know that cannabis is not uniform, even within the same plant.
Right. So like the lower nugs will be lower THC than yeah, absolutely. And that's something that was something that was new to me, that I've just learned about. And it's fascinating to learn about this. Like, even from limb to limb on a plant, you can have different concentrations of THC.
Yeah. So they have to, because they're giving out medicine, they have to make sure that they have no variation. And the way to do that is to send everything through a mastication process, and then put more flour in, add more stuff in to cut it, depending on what the percent is. And if you are getting 10% THC, you need to get that every single time. So I know why they do it. But that being said, I was lucky enough that I was working in a university where our chemistry department did have a DEA license to be working on cannabis. They were using cannabis from the University of Mississippi. So I asked if I could have some DNA from some of their stuff. They went through their licenses and said, you know what? As long as the plant material stays in the lab, you can take the DNA. Do you have a way to do that? I was like, hell yeah, I have a way to do that. So I did that. I just went into the lab, did my magic, and walked out with the DNA and left the plant material in the lab. And, regardless of them having to normalize the products that go out to patients that are in these studies, the actual plant material is not only chemically different, like it's, 10% THC cannabis. Where are you going to find that at a dispensary? Like you would be struggling, right?
No one's going to be able to sell that.
Right.
Also.
So
Yeah.
you're not going to find it unless it's, no, I would challenge people to find something that's 10%, and that's their high THC. So
I haven't seen any.
But not only that, but Danny Oliver did a study, and she found that Nighted Cannabis has a lot of CBN in it, like way more than what there is on the market, indicating that it's old. I found that the last harvest that they had was back in 2014, which means that if you order cannabis today, it's going to be 7, 8, 9 years old.
That's disgusting.
Yep, and I've seen the way they store it. It's in these big, like, cardboard barrels. I don't know if it's like temperature controlled. I don't know. But anyway, what I found is not only is it chemically different, it's devoid of terpenes. It is genetically different as well. It's more similar to hemp, but it's not even similar to cultivated hemp that we have today. It's more similar to some samples that I got from a herbarium from 1969 than it was from anything else that I could find. It's just different.
Huh. Okay. Yeah.
So that was a fun study. And that was really fun too, because it was an undergraduate that was like getting lab experience. And I was like, oh yeah, let's do a little project. And he, we ended up publishing that. So he's a rock star. Shout out to Connor Hansen.
Cool. I want to just, every like 10 or 15 minutes, I like to slap this up. I'm here with Dr. Anna Schwabe, cannabis scientist and geneticist. Boy, that's, I've talked to a number of people trying to do research, and I feel like, maybe the speed of federal legalization, maybe that's accelerating a little. If you asked me this time last year, I would have said maybe we're 10 years out, but it feels like that's speeding up. And it seems like when the walls come down on federal legalization, that would maybe open up some avenues for people such as yourself to get funding to do some of this research without having to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that, if they shifted into Schedule 3, clinical trials might open up. But again, for a lot of cannabis research, especially for consumption, smoking is and has always been the most popular method of consumption. But as we all know, smoking anything is not good for you, right? It's bad for your lungs. And so for doctors to be doing trials where they're letting or encouraging people to smoke anything is really difficult, right?
Interesting point, Anna. Yeah.
So like I just read, there was a study the other day that was on LinkedIn, and I had to go through a couple of different, like cross checks, because it said this, that, and the other. And I was like, this is great, except that this was administered via IV. Who does that? Like, we're measuring, levels in the blood via IV administration, not via smoking, which is what the vast majority of people do. Like, I don't know anybody who shoots up cannabis. It's not. For the people out there that don't know how you do the cannabis, that's not how you do it. And even if you wanted to and had a little piece of foil and a spoon, still doesn't work that way, right? Sorry.
Yep, great point you make there, Anna.
And then the other way they do it in clinical trials is to do an oral formulation. So if they're doing it in rats or something, they force feed. But people can take like a tincture or whatever. But that's also, it goes through the liver, which is, again, not and then it gets transformed into 11-hydroxy THC. That's not how most people, I mean, there's lots of people who do edibles, and so that's transferable if that's what we're talking about. But to read a study where it's been orally administered and then talk to somebody who takes it by smoking, like, those aren't necessarily the same thing.
Not comparable. That's apples and oranges, really.
Yeah.
And you said something about finding a high level of CBN in some of this stuff, and maybe you could tell by that it was old or something. Is there some correlation there?
Yeah, so the plant produces THCA. That's what the plant manufactures. It doesn't even actually make Delta 9. The Delta 9 occurs when you heat it up, like you do when you smoke it, or when you decarb it in the oven before you make edibles or whatever. The plant doesn't make that stuff. The plant also doesn't make CBN. CBN is a degradation product of Delta 9. So in order for the plant product to go from high THCA, it would degrade into Delta 9 because it doesn't just decarb by itself. It needs light, like UV light. It needs some sort of temperature. It needs something for it to go through that transformation process into Delta 9. And then Delta 9 degrades into CBN. So to find CBN in high quantities in any kind of flower product is definitely an indicator that it's old, that it's been improperly stored. So,
and you said something about people storing it in cardboard barrels, and I feel like that's probably not super airtight.
So super not airtight. And I don't know. And I don't know. Like I've seen them open up the cardboard barrels, and inside the cardboard barrel, there's like a plastic bag that just, ties like a bread bag, and then in that is all the flower material. I don't know if they're just stored in a warehouse, or if they're stored in a closet, or if they're stored in like a temperature controlled, humidity controlled storage facility. I don't know. The people who work that program would know, but honestly, when I came out with that paper, I got a nasty gram. It came out first on bioRxiv, which is, a preprint. It's not yet peer reviewed, and there is a comments box, when you put something up on bioRxiv. I did get a nasty gram from Mahmoud El Soli and George Weeblin saying, oh, your genetic analysis is bunk because you didn't account for this, that, and the other. To which I replied and very nicely said, well, none of those things really matter because this is what it is. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry if, you don't like our results, but.
Yeah. What was their complaint based on? I mean, like, just saying your results were wrong, or they don't like your
I don't
face,
even remember. I don't even remember. It was quite a while ago. I mean, it was like we put that up, I think, in 2000. I want to say either 17 or 18, maybe 18. And we didn't actually get it peer reviewed and published until 2022. Right? 2021, 22, something like that. So it took us a long time to get it published because, I mean, I can understand nobody wants to call out the federal government and be like, you're growing shitty weed. But eventually somebody was like, all right, fine, we'll publish it. I think it was Frontiers in Plant Sciences. But you can still see, like, you can go to bioRxiv. It has a different title than the full published peer-reviewed version of it. But that comment from George Weeblin and Mahmoud El Soli is still up, and my response is still up. So, people feel free. Yeah. Feel free. It's out there. And that's one of the things I love about, these preprints is that it's kind of like you can put it up and you can get peer reviewed by anybody. And George Weeblin and El Soli are very well established cannabis scientists. And they read the paper and they had things to say and they said it. I had I had the opportunity to think about what they said and respond to it. So that right there was a peer review, and it did get published regardless of what they had said. So,
and it seems like, at least in my opinion, from what I know of the peer review process, some of that stuff seems like a little bit of a circle jerk, if you ask me.
Well, the thing, okay, so, the way it works is you turn it in to, whatever journal. It gets assigned to an editor. The editor then finds peer reviewers. The peer reviewers get to see the paper. They get to see who the authors of the papers are. They get to, rip it apart, give constructive feedback, give unconstructive feedback, generally anonymously. So let's say you write a paper, I can see it's written by Caleb Teskey. I don't like you, so I'm going to read it through and I'm going to be like, no, fuck this, fuck that, fuck you, do not publish, and my name doesn't show up. So you get it back saying, fuck me, fuck you, fuck this. What?
It'll just say,
do not publish.
somebody said, go fuck yourself, and you don't know who it is.
Right. And they do that generally with 3 different reviewers. Sometimes it's 2. And then the editor decides, like, there was a couple of times where we have submitted papers, had 2 reviewers. One said, this is awesome, publish it. The other one said, nope, don't publish it. And the editor's like, we can't publish it, you're denied. And it's like, what? But the other guy said it was awesome.
Who are my peers here?
I know. And the last one, the last paper that I published, the THC one, it went through a round of review, like 2 reviewers, and they all said publish it. And the editor said, you know what, hold on a second, I'm going to give it to 3 more reviewers. And it went through 3 more reviewers. So it was like, and they did it because cannabis, hot topic. They need to make sure that it's good science, whatever. But that was in my mind uncalled for, and I've never had that happen before. And Mitt he's published a lot of papers. He's never had that happen before. Just get a whole new panel of reviewers just to see if somebody else says something different. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah, that is weird. I agree. I want to just slap something up because my dude, I've been running the Vermont Heady labels at the bottom. Dusty just sent me some logos. If you guys are curious, here's a few of the labels that he's done. The Honey Tree Farms, that's pretty savage. This Greencastle one was really nice, and those guys have been on the show. I just want to slap that up there real quick. Thanks for sending that over, Dusty. The next question I have is, boy, I think this is going to be a fun one, but I'd like to ask you about THC inflation and lab testing. And I've been following a number of different cases around the country here where it sure seems like we're seeing THC inflation in major labs around the country.
Yep. So this is something that I just kind of stumbled on when I was so this is I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on this, but
it's a big one.
We did the genetic analysis and we found that there were genetic outliers. So then Avery Gilbert, who is a scent scientist, contacted me, and we wanted to see if people could tell, like in a double-blind randomized study, could people sniff out a genetic outlier, right? So we've got 3 samples. 2 of them are genetically identical. One's completely different. Does that one that's completely different smell different, or does it smell the same and that's why it's labeled as such? Like, is it just a really mistaken identity kind of thing? And while I was doing that, we did find that people can, like, the smells of the genetic outliers were very different from the genetic consensus samples, the ones that were the same. But I wanted to actually look at the chemical level and look at the terpenes, look at the cannabinoids, and see, like, what is the variation. And I saw lots of variation within things that are exactly the same, as well as things that are not. But when I was looking at when the cannabinoid analysis came back, most of the THC is coming back around 13, 15, maybe 17%. And I was like, this seems really low. Like, I know for sure that I did not buy anything at any dispensary that was labeled at 15% THC. That seems really low. And so then I was wondering, like, what's going on? So I pulled out all the packaging, and all the samples were measured at much lower levels. So then we did all this stuff, like looked at the tests, grabbed some more samples from some different dispensaries, the highest we could find, the lowest we could find, and everything in between. Had everything retested. We even tested things. We've split them into 2 batches and tested them 12 months apart. So looking to see if maybe age was playing into the factor, like they were tested and then they sat around for a while and lost some potency. None of that was happening. And what we found, generally speaking, is that when you purchase cannabis, it only has about 70% of the THC that's printed on the label. So if you buy something that says 30%, multiply that by 0.7 and you'll get a much more accurate number. But this was back in 2018. I found this, and like I said, I just stumbled on it, and I was like, "This is wild. This shouldn't be happening, especially with the way that the sampling is supposed to happen. There are protocols and all this stuff." That one was really hard to get published. That was the one that we had 2 rounds of reviewers for, and right when the conversation really started to ramp up in about the summer of 2021. People really started to question some of these lab results. We were working on getting that paper published then. We finally were able to get it published. It was 4/11 of this year. They couldn't wait till 4/20, which I'm kind of pissed about, but whatever. But right before then, like, people were really like starting to do some secret shopping and showing. There was a couple of papers that came out that were looking at like national databases, and there was this irregular distribution at like 22%. Like, there just really wasn't anything available below 22%, which is just weird. Like, so
I've seen some of these. Can I cut you off for a second?
Yeah.
I've seen some of these data sets that are sort of maybe suggesting what you're talking about, where they have this discontinuity right around like 20, because they realize, maybe, I don't know, maybe like 19s ain't selling that well, but yeah, so some very strange. A normal bell curve is very smooth. It doesn't have this fucking giant jump right there, right where.
And the sampling protocols in most states, you should be taking in a representative sample for the whole batch, right? So that should include apical buds, which are going to be the most potent, but also middle and bottom buds. So you should have somewhere in the middle. So if your top bud, if your very, very, very best bud is up at 30+%, you should also have some of those bottom and middle buds that's going to drag that number down. So we should see a normal distribution, right? So anyway, it's been a crazy conversation. I've been blocked by people, and
hey, you too, huh?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the chain of custody stuff? Because I know I've talked to a bunch of people about this. In some states, like Vermont, growers are allowed to select their own samples. In other states, I understand they're trying to have someone from the state go out and collect samples. I'd be curious if you have any thoughts on that kind of idea.
So I don't know the ins and outs for every state. In Colorado, you take your own sample in. Of course, you're supposed to follow a protocol for sampling, but there's nobody overseeing that. And, when you give people are people. Human nature is human nature. If you give people a chance to cheat, they're gonna, especially when money's involved. So I don't fault anybody necessarily on that. But in other states, the lab comes and gets it. In other states, the dispensary or whatever preps, gets everything together, and then someone comes out and takes a representative sample and then takes it to the lab. I do think, and I mean, I don't know that there's really one right way to do it. I do think that nobody with a stake in the game should be collecting samples. So I don't think the cultivator, the dispensary, or the lab should be collecting the samples. I think it needs to be a third party, like, contractor who doesn't give a shit. Just comes out and does their job. Kind of like a health inspector, like, just come in to get the samples. I think it needs to be something like that. And possibly even have the samples be blinded, so that when they get to the lab doesn't even know who the samples belong to. So they can't get bought off, if from, I don't know, a multi-state operator who has a little bit more money than you know what I mean? Like,
that's an interesting idea, and I've never heard anyone suggest that, but yeah, okay, I'm on board.
And
with
why
that
not,
idea.
right? We've got seed to sale tracking. What?
Do you guys
Why
have the
can't
metric?
we?
You got the metric down there in New Jersey?
We do. But it's funny. There are stores operating here in New Jersey that are not dispensaries, but they do have flour. The one that I've been to has flour from, they gift it to you if you buy like a pipe for, a $1 pipe for $50. They'll give you some flour to go along with that. The one place that I went to had flour from Hawaii. How the fuck was that tracked from seed to sale? How did it get to New Jersey? Like, I don't think this seed to sale tracking system actually works.
I also don't think that. yeah, I'm on board with you. What's up? Is that your CBD beverage there, Anna, that you sent me a picture of?
It is. I just bought this at the store.
No, it's from
my
Wild.
liquor store.
Yeah. Oh, you bought that at a liquor store. Yeah.
I bought this at and I got another one that has 25 milligrams of CBD and 10 milligrams of CBN. I'm going to take that one at bedtime just in case.
I'm going to slap this up again. I'm here with Dr. Anna Schwabe. And I've got, boy, I feel like I could talk to you for 6 hours, Anna. But I want to ask you about, well, we're not gonna, but I want to ask you, no, over time. I want to ask you about, because I feel like I asked you about this on the phone, was about Epidiolex and GW Pharmaceuticals, and I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts. Maybe like I remember like Marinol and some of these synthetic pharmaceutical products that they're trying to create, and I was curious if you had any thoughts on that part of the industry here.
I have lots of thoughts. So Epidiolex is extracted from cannabis, from marijuana type cannabis. It's not a synthetic. Marinol is, I believe, and there's some other products. Sativex, I think, is semi-synthetic.
I forgot about that one, but yeah, they're trying that out at the VA hospitals now. It looks like.
Yeah, that's I think that one's is that a spray? Anywho, yeah, I mean, there is so much variation in cannabis that even I have suggested, like, if you want to deliver somebody a consistent medicine for cannabis, really the only way that you can do that is through some kind of formulation. And, Epidiolex is just CBD. It doesn't, it's 98% pure CBD. The other 2% is other stuff that they couldn't get out of the extraction. And then it's got the carrier oil and a strawberry flavoring. But there are some other companies working on formulations of several cannabinoids and or terpenes. But I think that formulations have the potential to deliver that exact dose of medicine in the same concentration, in the same manner every single time, which is what we're used to with our medicine. And it is a challenge for some people who want the whole plant medicine to get that consistency, to know what they're getting every single time, especially when we don't have fucking accurate test results.
Yeah, and especially with the edibles, because my tolerance, like I've been eating edibles for over a decade, and my tolerance is still around 20 milligrams. If you gave me 50, I'd probably be a fucking couch locked, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'm about to have a panic attack. It's not a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
Like anything that's not, and that's why I like properly dosed edibles, because it gets very weird in a hurry for me personally.
Me too. I think about 2.5 is my absolute max. If I'm feeling like I want to go for a circus ride, but 5 to 10, I get really it's almost like I'm drunk. Like I lose motor coordination. I feel very uncomfortable.
Yep.
And I want to go to sleep, but I can't. Like my mind is racing, but thinking really weird shit. It's not really fun.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, straight up, and it's that's the difference between like 20 and 50 for me, which I accidentally ate 100 milligram gummy a few years ago, and yeah, it was I couldn't even stand up. I couldn't stand up. I felt like I was having a panic attack. I'm having trouble breathing. Well, I have to like remind myself to breathe, which is not good when you have to, manually perform like involuntarily bodily functions. So.
Oh, I know. I had a friend of mine. I had a hangover, and a friend of mine gave me like a little tiny piece of like a cookie, and she was like, "This will make you feel better." And I was like, "Okay." And it was just, I was like, "How bad could it be?" 16 hours. I shit you not. I'm curled up in the fetal position, telling my boyfriend, "Go smoke more pot. I want you to feel like me." He's rubbing my back, being like, "It's okay. It'll go away soon." And I'm like, "No, you go smoke more pot."
I got a few more for you here, Anna. One of them I wanted to talk about, which seems like a hot topic right now, is the hop latent viroid disease. I don't know if it's a disease, but I feel like we chatted about this, and I don't really know much about it, but I know a lot of people are talking about it. And if you got any thoughts on the hop latent, I'd love to hear it.
What do I want to? I mean, it's shitty. It's going around. There are, it's very contagious, and people are some dispensaries are not really paying attention to when they get things in, keeping things in quarantine, keeping things in separate containers so that they're not mixing the water, because you might have one clone that is contaminated. You put it in the same well with other clones that are not. Now all of them have hop latent viroid. I think there is the potential that there are going to be some strains that are resistant. And I think we're gonna, obviously the hop industry has been dealing with it. And they have that's their workaround, is they've been producing hop cultivars that are resistant to it. It's kind of like coronavirus. Like, it's not going anywhere. We can take precautions to protect ourselves. And there are some people that are like, I don't want to say this. Where's my wood that I can touch? I haven't had it and I don't want it. But there's some people who get it and they're totally asymptomatic. And that goes for, lots of viruses and viroids. It affects people differently. I think same thing with hop latent viroid. And I think we got some really talented breeders and researchers and folks out there that I think we will start to find some sort of resilient strains that fare well, even though they're infected. I'm not saying that we should just, carte blanche, let hop latent viroid run rampant through everything. But, it is something that we're always going to have to be aware of. It's not going anywhere. It's definitely out there.
Can I hit you with a couple comments here? We got, I don't know.
I don't know.
It's Frank and Beans. He said hop latent virus is an excuse bad growers use. 9 out of 10 times it's overwatering.
Nope.
It's not true. I've been growing for years. Whoever says they have the virus, they're usually just a bad grower.
There are genetic tests that would prove otherwise. It's you can test something. The virus has its own genetic code. If you test a plant and that code shows up, your plant is infected. And there are specific symptoms of hop latent viroid that are not the same as overwatering. But
what does hop latent viroid do to a cannabis plant? Could you explain that a little bit? Because it looks like maybe in my average Joe opinion, it looks less frosty. You could see it's not dripping as much with all those trichomes, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm by no means a expert on hop latent viroid. Zamir Punja and Jeremy Warren are probably the foremost experts in hop latent viroid. But really what it comes down to is, when did the plant get infected? So was it infected from the get-go, like as a clone, or was it already mostly grown when it got infected? If it's infected as a clone, of course it's going to stunt the growth. like you said, it's the trichome development is going to be less than optimal. In fact, it like deflates the heads of the trichomes. So where you would see like a big like balloon looking trichome head in hop latent viroid, you can see the heads of the trichomes are deflated. It's almost like they've given up, like, oh, so sick. It can stunt the growth, the entire growth of the plant. It's not going to do anything to you. So if you have an infected plant and you smoke it, it's not going to affect you. But for producers and growers that are looking for a specific, weight or chemotypic profile, a certain THC, a certain amount of terpenes, it's definitely going to affect that. So.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, and this is all new to me. I didn't even know, although a grower here in Vermont mentioned this last year before it really started blowing up in the news. And then I saw it blowing up in the news and I was like, hey, you really know your shit there, buddy.
So Jeremy Warren from Dark Heart Nurseries, he is the one that discovered hop latent viroid was infecting cannabis. He's the one that isolated it, got it tested, and figured it out. So we had him on our show, The Dank Hour, and he explains the whole thing about like what a viroid is, how he found it, what's going on with it. He does a lot of consulting and things like that. And Zamir Punja is the other guy.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there any type of papers we could read? Samir Punja, you said?
Yeah, it's here. I'll write it in the chat for you.
Yeah, cool. And this guy's asking if there's any type of scientific documented examples.
Look up Zamir Punja. He's got multiple papers on it.
Cool. Thank you. And I'm going to also check that out because some of this stuff is fascinating to me. And especially, I've been helping with some outdoor farms here. We've seen a lot of septoria creeping in from just the sheer amount of rain that we've had this year. It's been kind of wild. And learning about that is super fascinating. There's always new shit coming out. And I just love that. It seems like plant science is ever evolving and it just keeps you on your toes constantly.
Well, and in such a, booming industry where people are, scaling up and planting, thousands of plants in a small space. You've got, micro ecosystems and things like hotspots and, moisture and all of this stuff all happening in the one place. And when you're dealing with live organisms, shit can go wrong real fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get your facility contaminated. That could be very costly in a hurry. You miss a cycle and, bang, you get a pest.
You put a 100,000 people in a desert and it rains and look what happens. Hashtag, Running Man. shit can go wrong real fast.
Yo, I do want to send a shout out to you from my buddy Eric Kafka here, who has a tier 3 manufacturing lab and said he actually did a conference with you where you were both presenting a few years back in 2019, maybe. Thanks, Eric. He's a super sharp guy. He's got an organic chemistry background and And also you mentioned the Denver Botanical Gardens, and somebody else hit me up and mentioned that they saw you speak there as well. So that was cool. Small world.
Yeah, they used to. So I've had pink hair for a long time, which makes me really recognizable and memorable. It's always been pink. It's never been another color. I've had it for like 15 years. So at the Denver Botanic Gardens, when I was working on various projects, we shot a video about me talking about how we use DNA and molecular genetics to inform conservation projects. And so it was playing like in the science pyramid all the time. And so people were like, oh my God, you're that girl. And I'm like, yeah, that's me.
It's nice. When I went to Vegas at MJ Biz, my hair was super purple and people remembered me. They're like, oh, you were the guy with the purple hair. Like, yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cheesy gimmick, but I like it. And it looked good and it matches my logo. And
Yeah, actually, I was just talking to somebody the other day that if I ever dyed my hair at any other color, I think there are a lot of people, including friends of mine, that just wouldn't recognize me. Like, oh,
wouldn't recognize Dr.
familiar.
Anna Schwabe.
Wouldn't
Wham,
recognize me.
cannabis scientist. Anna, do you want to do a shout out for the lady who made the earrings? Because I saw the earrings on LinkedIn the other day, and I was curious
Yeah,
about
dude,
that.
they're so cool. Okay, so these are them. For anybody who has ever worn, cannabis leaf jewelry, often it's silver and super pokey, not comfortable to wear, especially if you happen to fall asleep. These are leather, so they're all soft and pliable, and they're gorgeous. They're really comfortable to wear. Alice Moon, who is she used to be a cannabis influencer back in the day, and then she developed cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and she was very outspoken about that. This is her new venture. It's called High on Plants. And so they sell these gorgeous earrings. This is the hot pink, but they also have they have a neon green, but they also have like a gorgeous dark green, teal, burgundy, all of the, pretty cannabis colors out there.
I couldn't
And
believe that it was leather. I was like, leather? I thought that was going to be plastic or metal or something. Yeah.
yeah, they're freaking
Yeah.
awesome. And they're not that expensive. And she's, they just launched the company like a couple of weeks ago. So if you're in the market for some cannabis accessories, highly recommend. And Christmas is coming up. And these are the bigger design. They do have a smaller one as well.
Oh, cool.
But, go big or go home.
Uh-huh. And I got one left for you that you touched on earlier, but I had a friend who asked me about the dank hour, and I was really hoping you would talk about that for a minute before we get out of here. Thanks for being here, by the way, Anna. This has been a pleasure.
Not a problem. This has been super fun.
And my buddy was curious. He was like, we're looking for other people who are involved with podcasts, and he heard about the dank hour, and he said, could you please ask Anna about the dank hour? And it's already in my notes. So, yeah.
So the dank hour started on Clubhouse back in 2021. So we're in our third season now. It has always been, it started out as just like a discussion, but it got so big that we sort of made it like a panel. And then we would have an audience where the audience could like raise their hand and ask questions or whatever. And then it sort of got some structure to it where we would have like specific topics we were going to talk about with the panel of experts. And then we started inviting guests on. This season, we just switched to the video format. So we're live streaming. We use StreamYard as well. We live stream on YouTube and LinkedIn, and we have a special guest every week. We don't really talk about smoking pot or like products. It's not like we don't invite people on to promote products. We do invite cannabis experts on from all arms of the industry. So we've had on chefs, we've had on glass blowers. This past week we had on the Banana Brothers, who make a hands-free grinder, which I was like, how are we going to fill up 90 minutes talking about a grinder? But it's freaking awesome. It snaps together with magnets. It's not screw on at all. And it's all hands-free. You can clean it really easily. But like for people who have mobility issues or like arthritis, I can't open the stupid like childproof packaging, and I suck at rolling. Yeah. I suck at rolling joints, and this little grinder, like there's a other bit you can snap on, and it just grinds it straight into the pre-roll. Cool. So you don't have to do anything. Your hands don't even have to work for you to use it. Anyway, really freaking cool. We've had on all kinds of scientists. We've had on Reggie Gaudino, Daniela Vergara, Eleanor Kuntz from LeafWorks, Matthew Gates, I think, is our next guest. He's the bug guy. Talks a lot about bugs and pathogens and stuff. We've had on all kinds of people. And if you can go to it's through the Future Cannabis Project on YouTube. Last season we were on their back channel, their second channel. This season we're on their channel 1 because we got a lot of viewers now and stuff.
Getting bumped up. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, so but it's every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time, so that's 5 p.m. Pacific. and you can catch it live, but it's recorded as well. So if you miss an episode or you really just want to see an episode that is from back in the day, you can go look those up. But we've had all kinds of people on. It's a really, really fun show.
Who is this guy? Hold up. Russo.
Oh, Ethan Russo. Some people know about him. He's, just a doctor or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know much about him. I was wondering if you'd tell me a little bit, because I've heard his name floated around a bunch, and I'm still very new at this myself.
Ethan Russo is, arguably one of the top cannabis medical on the medicine side, doctors, scientists. He has looked into all kinds of stuff. I think I can't remember. I think his actual trade, I'm going to get it wrong. Maybe it's pediatrics. I don't know. But he's got a ton of publications. He's written a bunch of books.
I'll Joe Rogan it right now. Jamie, pull that up.
He's written a bunch of books. He is famously the person who published that strain. The term strain has no place in botany because it's reserved for bacteria and viruses, which is completely not true, although I'm not going to pick a fight with Ethan Russo. But yeah, strain is a perfectly acceptable term to talk about, to use when you're talking about plants. There are strains of wheat and strains of rice. So now people are like, don't call it a strain. It's not a strain. It's a cultivar. You can call it a strain. It's fine. It's completely fine. And most of the time it's right.
He was a neurologist, psychopharmacology, and also a former senior medical advisor to GW Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Cool.
And he's a bunch of books. He's got a ton of publications. Super nice guy. What has he been talking about most recently? I don't even know. I can't keep them all straight. But we did have him on the show a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw that. That's super cool. That seems like a great guest to have on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was impressed. I was impressed with your guest list.
Thanks. Mm-hmm. We'll have him on again. I'm sure there's a lot of guests actually that we would like to have on again because we need a part 2. We just didn't get enough done in 90 minutes.
We're getting there too, Anna, and I'd love to have you back on the show and check in like a year down the road and see how you're doing. I am running out.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll have any new research to do. I'm not actually actively doing any research right now. I'll probably have a lot more to tell you about how bad I suck at cultivating. But
I'd love to hear about your business too and how that shakes out, because from what I've heard, New Jersey, it's just a nightmare to set up a business. And I thought you were nice about that based off what I've heard about trying to start a business there.
It's the people I work for, and it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I wish you the best of luck down there, Anna. That was my last question. So I'm going to hold up. I'm going to pull myself back up. I'm going to make ourselves even here. I always leave the last word for my guest. I want to thank you again for your time tonight. I want to shamelessly slap this back up here. It's Anna Schwabe, Dr. Cannabis.
Dr.
I like what you did there. Anna,
there's a funny story. There's a funny story behind that, actually. So, Dr. Cannabis, I did not give myself that name. I just told the story behind the cannabis thing, and it just stuck with my friends. So when I graduated with my PhD and got a big girl job, I went and got myself a new car, because that's what you do, right? Right when you start earning more money, you got to go spend it right away. So when I got my new car, I went to go register it, and the lady at the DMV was like, are you interested in vanity plates? And I was like, maybe. How much more do they cost? And she told me, and I was like, yeah. And she's like, okay, so what do you want to put on it? And she's like, here, you give me 2 things that, your top 2. And I was like, cannabis. And it just popped into my head, and I wrote it down. And the other one was like Anna CBD or something like that. And she's like, cannabis. She's like, what does that mean? And I was like, well, my name's Anna and I have a business. And she's like, oh, okay, that's really cool. And I thought, there's no way that they're going to approve these. Like, no way. And they came in the mail. Nobody said anything. I was like, Jesus fucking Christ, this is so cool.
So that's your plate.
My license plates say Cannabis.
Sick.
Yeah.
They didn't put that one together.
They didn't put it together. And so the governor, Jared Polis, he now has, like, there's certain cannabis themed license plates you can purchase, but they cost a lot more, like $420 whatever. You can have them now, but they cost a lot more money. And I was like, I got my own.
Anna, if you got any shameless plugs or shout outs, or if there's anything that we missed tonight, I'd like you to throw that in right now, because I always leave the last word for the guests, and then we're going to get the fuck out of here. And thank you again for your time. This has just been a great conversation, and I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And I've really enjoyed having a conversation with you. So anybody who's interested in any of my research or Dank Hour episodes, or reading my dissertation, my actual defense, I also recorded. I have the video of that up on my website, which you flashed up on the screen. It's just www.annaschwabe.com. Super easy to find. And it's got little tabs at the top so you can find all the things. I also have a line of education courses. I think there's about 38 of them, all obviously cannabis related, everything from basic plant stuff to, chemistry, regulatory agencies, you name it. It's up there, and I'm constantly working on that. And then the other thing that I would like to mention is that I am on the board of a nonprofit organization with Danielle Vergara. She's the one who started the foundation. It's called the Agricultural Genomics Foundation, and we're dedicated not only to education, but also to cannabis genomic work. The nonprofit has been kind of on hold for a while, but we're ramping back up. And as I, talked about at the beginning of the show, getting funding for cannabis research is extremely difficult. And so we have this foundation that people can donate to so that we can start to get some of this much needed research done without having to beg to the federal government, who's basically just going to laugh at us. So if there's anybody out there who's interested in cannabis research and wants more genomic work done, wants to know what cannabis looks like around the world, finding specific genes for stuff, for example, for like powdery mildew resistance, those are the types of things that, we're dedicated to looking at. And because it's a nonprofit, we don't own the data. We will make the data public. Everybody will be able to use the data. And we can't sell the company because it's not a company, it's a nonprofit organization. So if Bayer or Monsanto want to swoop in and buy all of the data, they can't, because it doesn't belong to us. So we're kind of dedicated to keeping everything in the public space so that we can all benefit from whatever we find. So if you're interested in that, that's the Agricultural Genomics Foundation, and there's donate buttons all over my page. If you want to go to my website, that's the easiest way to find me, and all my social medias, my LinkedIn and Instagram and all that good stuff.
And I hope you connect with Rodney. I try to put you guys in touch. He was super curious to talk to you also. And I think you're probably watching this right now, and he's going to, get in touch if he hasn't already. Anna, thanks so much. I spoiled your last word there a little by running my mouth a bit, but it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And I wish you the best of luck with your business endeavors. And I hope we can stay in touch here.
Oh, we will. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's one more shameless plug. It's Anna Schwabe, cannabis geneticist. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, reminding you that the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print.